Welcome to Hot Takes. I'm Tara, a media consultant and founder of McEwen Media, and the host of this conversation, this podcast, whatever you want to call it. Usually, when I hop on Hot Takes, I'm talking about storytelling and performance in high stakes settings, where whether it's a television interview or delivering a keynote or selling your services. But in the last couple of months, the high stake conversations and communications happening for businesses, a lot of that is happening internally. Businesses of all sizes are making strategic decisions and choices just to navigate what's happening in the economy. They're big stakes, high stakes conversations. And honestly, when it comes to business, there's no such thing as a right or a wrong decision. Every choice that you make just sends you down a path that has its own successes, failures, and even further challenges. But one thing I do know for certain, whatever choices you're making right now, how you manage that conversation, both internally and externally, that's going to have a greater impact on the success of your business than the choices themselves. So that's what I mean by high stakes communication. So in this hot take, we're going to talk about like what it is like to deliver the tough messaging. Do not just make the tough decisions, but then to communicate it with your team, with your stakeholders, with the public, how to do this most effectively and with the greatest impact. So of course, when it comes to a topic like this, I bring in the pros. So Lisa Kay is a dynamic and seasoned human resources leader. She has more than 2 decades of experience driving strategic people initiatives across diverse industries, including energy, technology, and professional services. Lisa brings a strong foundation in HR best practices, a deep understanding of organizational dynamics, and a passion for building inclusive, engaged, and high-performing workplaces. So welcome to the stage, and thank you for being my guest today, Lisa Kay.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is so much fun. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and to talk about this because it really is so important.
It absolutely is. Like we met a couple of weeks ago, at a networking breakfast, and the energy that you have and the insight that you have into like just like the internal, the human organization side of business, like that's the real thing that's happening. So give us a high level view. What are businesses dealing with this current economic crisis? Let's just call it what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, I mean, businesses have struggled with communications always. I mean, that's not a new phenomena, certainly. But yes, with the current economic climate and how that impacts employees in the workplace, communications is so much more important, and making sure that you're not sweeping issues under the rug and not hiding from your employees when times are tough is really, really important. So that's where you and I sort of fell into a conversation about this, and I thought this is such a great message to be able to deliver to businesses about how best to communicate. I mean, I can appreciate right now a lot of our clients are dealing with certain issues, like for example, workplace reductions, or should they reduce work staff? Should they put in a hiring freeze, for example? Companies who were looking to hire this year are now reconsidering whether that makes sense given tariffs and other economic factors. So how does that impact the employee, right? I mean, employees see this. All of a sudden, one day there's 4 job postings out on the company bulletin board, and then the next day, on a bulletin board, that doesn't really exist, but you know what I mean. And then the next day, all of a sudden, there's been a hiring freeze declared. What does that do to the employees and their anxiety levels about their role and their stability and their financial situation? So, in enabling companies to deliver communications that are meaningful and not frightful to employees, just to give them information to put them at ease. And maybe that information is not all positive, but in the way that you deliver it, you can kind of hopefully alleviate some of the stress that's going on in their minds.
Yeah, it's definitely, I can appreciate, being a business owner at this point. I have, like, I'm a team of one, but I do have, interested parties. I have a virtual assistant, I have clients. So any of the strategic decisions that I've been making for the last 6 months to stay afloat and to secure the future of my business, I understand now. I have a greater appreciation for what leaders are dealing with, right? These are big, high stakes, in terms of long-term investment, what we can spend our money on for payroll, who we can hire, how we can be more efficient. These are they're important decisions to make. And in theory, they're neutral, right? 2 + 2 will always equal 4. You need to, bring in more money than what you're spending. Like that's the maths. But it's the human element that comes into play. I'm thinking back to when I worked in network television at Bell Media. Layoffs, there was a literal bulletin board that went up with quite regularity, quite frequent occasions, and it always triggered anxiety and the rumor mill, and just controlling that information is the hardest thing to do. So I think communication, they sound like on paper it sounds like, well, we're talking about layoffs, we're talking about redundancies, we're talking about investment, we're talking about humans, and we're talking about fear and uncertainty and just what happens in their imaginations and the information that they're bringing in. So let's then start talking about then some strategy, because there are certain frameworks that managers can rely on to at least mitigate the information that's going out there.
Yeah. And I love, you mentioned the concept of the rumor mill, because I think leaders, because nobody likes to have difficult conversations or awkward conversations, or, they don't want to deliver messages to people that are going to be upsetting. And with the absence of information, that is where the rumor mill it gets started, and it's very hard to control it once it's started rolling, right?
Yeah.
So, from an HR perspective and dealing with employees, it's the most important message I can say is communicate, and communicate regularly. Yes, if you never communicate to staff and all of a sudden you call a town hall, I can assure you, people are going to have suspicions and get really nervous, and it's going to perpetuate a problem. But if you can communicate in bits and chunks throughout the year, and then also, as a part of that, ensure that you're covering topics that people want to know. Don't gloss over the difficult conversations. Give them as much information as you can, even if it's not necessarily positive. You try to put a positive spin on, this is the situation. It's not good, but this is what we're going to try to do within our organization. And this is the strategy we're taking. Having that and understanding helps employees to cope and to appreciate that the business is working through something, as opposed to, what's going on? Nobody's talking, must be bad. At least they have an understanding of what's going on behind the scenes.
I love that. I love that, how you position that too. Like, it's about giving them understanding of what's happening behind the scenes, especially I think because of what the information that we're getting, on the media level, on the news level, right? These tariffs and trade wars. Every time I turn on the news, they're like, well, this is what we know about the tariffs today. This is how we understand that they're working today. So I think, when you think in terms of just the sheer volume of information that people are exposed to and that they're carrying around and that they're using to then interpret their day to day, you as a leader and as a business owner, just distill it to, this is how this current environment is affecting us. And these are the changes that we're making. I think that is, it's neither good or bad. It's just, it's the facts, right? Just stick to, these are the facts, how they affect us. I think back to, the early days of the pandemic. I think that was kind of the last time we had this environment of an uncertain future. The messaging around there was, don't worry about what's happening in Italy. Don't think about what's happening in lockdowns in China. Think about what's like your block, right? How is your household affected? How is your block affected? So in terms of your business, your industry might be affected, but in terms of the people that you're speaking to, focus on, this is how we're meeting this situation. Bring it down to that and get neutral. These are the facts. This is what's coming at us, and here's our response to it as of today. Yeah.
As of today, or another interesting situation, which I know a lot of our clients are struggling with, because we deal primarily with small, mid-sized companies. They don't even know yet. They don't know how they're dealing with it yet. And not knowing is okay. I mean, that's something that they're working on. So even if you don't have very specific information, just communicating that you're on it. You guys are discussing it. You're considering your options. Here's a general idea of the direction we think we're going, or here are some of the options or the alternatives. Even if there's nothing new to report, having communications will build the trust that when there's something to report, your employer will be there to tell you about it, you know? So
Exactly.
that's really what it's about, is building the trust, ensuring that people aren't left in the dark and feeling scared. And, you know, as part of that communication, it's also so important. This is another point I wanted to make. Whether it's a big company or a small company, communication is kind of the same, but may look different. So for example, in a small company, if there's only 5 employees,
Mhm.
it's fairly easy to communicate. You can have, lunch, you can just sit around a table, you can meet at the water cooler for, using another old expression there. In a larger company, having all of your managers and leaders aligned. So,
Yeah.
messaging needs to come from the top down and has to be consistent. You can't have the CEO making one point to their direct managers or to their direct reports and then cascading down a different message. We need
Mhm.
to make sure everybody's delivering the same message. So
Mhm.
finding ways of communicating, there may be different approaches. You may start with an email, and then you may have like a small town hall or a small group gathering or a Zoom call, depending on how your business is structured. So maybe if you're in a hybrid business, or a business that's primarily remote, you have a Zoom call. You get everybody together to
Mhm.
communicate. And then lastly, having a way for employees to channel their feedback as well. So
Mhm.
whether that's to their direct managers, if there's questions or concerns, who can they talk to about some of those things? And having that communication channel be available to them, that's important as well.
Mm. And I think having that structure, that communication structure established, and to communicate that as well. You make such a good point too about, like, if you're suddenly showing up, if there's suddenly, like, regular emails from the CEO and you've never experienced this person in your entire life, that's terrifying.
Yes.
Some far down the food chain, it's like, well, hang on a second. The lead guy is telling me not to panic. I've never heard from him the entire time I've worked here. That's causing me to panic. So I think it is, yeah, be aware too of the communication structure and environment that your team knows and is familiar with, and gradually, like, lay some groundwork, ease them into, well, this is now the communication funnel that we're going to use in this transition period. And I think too, it's also important to communicate it's temporary. Like, yes, some significant trade rules are being rewritten right now. There will be something on the other side of this. We don't know
Right.
when, we don't know what it is, but it's a transition period. Transition is challenging, but this is what we have for right now, and make it clear. But I think also just be aware of, like, how is this new structure
Right.
coming to your team as well, because anything new at this point is going to trigger fear, anxiety. So just being clear, we understand that this is new to you. This is why we're doing this. And then having clear, here is who you can talk to when you're feeling XYZ,
Exactly.
because all the feels are coming up. Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And the other piece that kind of just occurred to me as you were speaking was, if the rumor mill has already started and
Yeah.
you're aware of things within your business that people might be talking about, whether they're true or untrue, I personally am an advocate for confronting those things, just
Yeah.
coming right out and addressing them. If there's truth to them, what is the truth? If it's complete fabrication, let's just get that off the table so that you can alleviate some of that stress as well that comes with
Mhm.
just the natural inclination of people to talk amongst themselves and create scenarios that may or may not be accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you also mentioned earlier about putting a positive spin on things. I want to talk a little bit about spin, because this is a message that I've been saying in PR spaces for a while now. Audiences are, their BS detector is an all-time high, right? So people, we're very media savvy. We know when someone is trying to spin something around. So I think spin, or attempts to spin or control the message, are going to backfire, because people are very educated, or at least they feel like they're educated and they're informed. So it is about, again, it's clarity. So I've been in town halls where they say that they've opened up questions to the team. You know that most of those questions are planted. So just, like, don't try to dress it up as anything. If there are rumors going around, address, these are the common rumors we've been hearing. This is actually the truth. Like, just call it what it is.
Yes.
Don't pretend we're going to have an open town hall where everyone's free to speak, and based on whose questions are being
Right.
asked. Oh my God, this is not exactly authentic. So I think, yeah, don't try to
That's so true.
spin right now is not, people have no tolerance for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I can think back to times where I've come out of town halls, um, where people can just, they just know that
You
that
just,
did not feel genuine,
yeah.
and that's worse, right? Like that's worse. If you're gonna if you're gonna communicate, bring everybody together for a message, you don't want them walking out of there thinking, shaking their head, saying, I'm not buying it, right?
Yeah.
You want to be as genuine as you can. And the other thing is, don't avoid the topic.
Mhm.
So if you know that there's a crisis going on in the news and that it affects your industry,
Mhm.
don't pull together a group of people for a town hall and then not address that
Yeah.
that elephant in the room, because clearly that's what they're here hoping to hear, right? So
Mhm.
um, you don't want to talk around it. You want to confront those issues. And listen, it's not easy, and it's not easy for leaders or managers to have those conversations. We're all human.
Mhm.
Nobody likes to have these awkward types of conversations, but it is really important in order to keep employees, first of all, engaged and be able to focus on their work without being distracted by some of the stress that's going on
Mhm.
in today's world. So
Absolutely, yeah. I think this is where empathy, in both communication standpoint and the leadership standpoint, empathy, I think, is where you can really strike that right note. Right? It's not about, it's not Chicken Little. The sky is falling, and not everything is fantastic, but just empathy. Right? This is tough times, and we understand the impact that this is having on you. Like I'm thinking of GM workers who were told this morning, "Hey, there's the shift you were counting on no longer exists." Like just having empathy for the impact that has on the individuals, the impact that it has on the community at large, and just carrying that, like using that as the emotional tone for your messaging. I think that's an easy way around avoiding spin and putting too negative a point on things. It is just, hey, this is tough. We
yeah.
know that you're impacted in a certain way. So what's some guidance that you give to leaders about practicing empathy in their leadership?
Well, in an ideal world, all leaders would have that naturally, innate.
But this is the real
Truthfully,
world. This is the
it's
real
not
world,
it's
Lisa.
not
Yeah.
realistic. But listen, I think speaking to people where they're at.
Yeah.
So, trying to deliver a message to people where they're at. I mean, if you're speaking to a room of all white collar executives, you're probably going to communicate differently than you are going to be speaking to a room of, you know, uh, production staff that are paid hourly, for example.
Yeah.
So, delivering your message to people in a way that is meaningful to them.
Yeah.
Speaking about company margins and stakeholders and dividends and all sorts of fancy terminology that others in a role that it just doesn't connect with them. They really just want to understand what's happening to me, what's
Yeah.
happening to my position, what's happening to my colleagues, what's happening to my department. Are we okay?
Yeah.
And so I think that's an important element as well, is know your
Mhm.
audience and try, if you can empathize, if you need any coaching on that, seek
Mhm.
coaching as a leader, but
Mhm.
do your best to connect with people where they're at. I think is an
Yeah.
important part of that.
I agree. And I think I'm looking back to, the last time I was on the receiving end of, a company going through transition. Looking back, I mean, I was ready to go. And I feel like that there were conversations that gave me a sense of autonomy. Instead of just being on the receiving end of messaging, but just like having people, like just having a space for, like, hey, I'm actually done here. Like I don't actually want to fight this transition. What are my options to
Right.
move on? Right.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I had a leader who already knew how I was feeling and was like, yeah, here's your package. It's good for you to go. But I also feel like empathy, but creating space for people where things are uncertain for them. But if you can then provide resources or provide a space for them to start making choices and giving them some sense of autonomy, like who can they talk to talk about their finances, right? Like really think through the
Exactly. Yeah.
scenarios. Because when it comes down to the fear of losing your job, it's not, my career growth trajectory. It's how am I going to pay my bills? Right?
Yeah.
What am I doing?
Both. Yeah.
Yeah. Am I booking a Christmas vacation this year? Like these are some of the questions that people are dealing with. So just to me, empathy is also the messaging of like, well, this is the future of the company, but then also creating space. Hey, do you want a future with this company? And what does that look like?
Right. What are
Or
the
is that
alternatives?
too radical an idea?
Well, yeah, and actually, you remind me. I mean, as an HR professional, one of
Yeah.
the things, when we're having difficult conversations, for example, in a termination
Yeah.
scenario, um, one of the things we always recommend that leaders and managers do is remind the person of any benefits, or resources that they're entitled to during that period, or even before termination. If there's anything that an employee is dealing with on a personal level
Yeah.
that's impacting them at work, do they have an EAP, an employee assistance program that they can turn to for support and
Yeah.
help and guidance? What other benefits can they be utilizing to help alleviate some of that concern and stress they're dealing with? So in these uncertain times, again, a reminder of what resources are available to them is so important as well.
Yeah.
Because people sometimes, it's funny, as somebody who's overseen benefits programs before, I can tell you how underutilized certain services are, and
Yeah.
people don't remember they have them. I mean, I've been guilty of that too. I was like, oh, look at that. I didn't even realize I had that as part of my extended health benefit package.
Mhm.
And there's things that they may have access to that can be really helpful. And so to communicate that is
Yeah.
really important.
What would be some of the key benefits that people should be asking for? Like if there is uncertainty, if there is anxiety at work, what should they be looking for?
Well, I mean, again, so it depends on each employer's
Yeah.
what they have available through their benefits package, if they have benefits. But most extended benefits plan will have at least a minimum amount of coverage for psychology or
Yeah.
social work. They'll have massage therapy and chiropractic, naturopath, things like that are great. I mean, I
Mhm.
need a massage right now. I can tell you that. So things, just help you kind of transition, as
Yeah.
well as other resources that are available. So to your point, if there's financial struggles,
Yeah.
there may be opportunities for them to apply for grants or loans or other things that are accessible to them that their EAP can refer them to.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, because you mentioned, when we're talking about empathy, you mentioned, getting coaching for leaders. Coaching at any point, anytime you're looking at a transition, just finding a space to talk it through, getting neutral, and then regulating your own nervous system. It's easier to make decisions and to take actions when you are calmed. If you're reacting, if you're in a heightened state, it's just making the situation worse. So another point we have here too is stability. So how can leaders create stability when it feels like the foundation's been ripped out from underneath us?
Yeah, it's a good question, but I think it goes to everything we've just talked about.
Yeah.
It is hard. I mean, listen, we're not going to pretend there's always going to be people within the workplace whose minds are going to be running, and there's nothing you can say or do that's going to
Yeah.
calm that. But you should still try.
Mhm.
At least if you're delivering the message, if you're doing things right as a manager or a leader or business owner, you can hopefully create some stability around that, and
Mhm.
hopefully impact most of the employees. If there's one-off conversations you need to have, like a manager and an employee, to deal with a specific situation, again, don't brush those things under the rug. Don't
Mhm.
call them a performance issue when maybe there's just something that you need to have a conversation about.
Mm.
People are struggling, so recognizing that and addressing it, for what it is as well is going to be important.
Yeah. How do you feel about performance checks and performance reviews during challenging times?
Yeah, it's a good question.
Yeah.
Um, Listen, performance gets impacted, right? Like
Yeah.
employee burnout is a thing, and
Yeah.
if employees are trying to balance their work and their workload and their goals and objectives and expectations, as well as their fear and anxiety around, will my job be here tomorrow or next
Mhm.
week or next month? Will I have money to feed my family? Will I have all of those things that we've talked about, paying the bills? It creates a lot of stress, and that can result in burnout. And we're seeing that. We're seeing a lot of employees taking leaves of absences to deal with their stress, which,
Yeah.
by the way, in turn impacts the business, of course. And it's a
Yeah.
real problem right now. It's a huge issue that a lot of our clients are dealing with: stress leaves, medical leaves, as a result of just dealing with what's going on in individual lives. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. I mean, we could probably have a whole other hot take just on the performance review in and of itself. But I was reflecting back on like my career, and I'm going back to like the first jobs I ever had, like working minimum wage. The best company that for and how they approach performance reviews, they're not a sponsor, Starbucks. So I worked at Starbucks for a year and change in my early 20s, and that was the first time I had ever been asked about like my personal goals. So beyond like what university you want to get into, that was the first time I had been asked, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I remember vividly the manager encouraging me to think like, even if it's not working for us in 5 years, where do you want to be in 5 years? So I think that that's a really great, just acknowledging there can be a life outside this job at this company, right? Like if we're going through a transition, you have private goals, you are a person outside of this business. So that would be how I would kind of approach and reframe the performance review. It's like, yeah, work is one thing, but who are you outside of this? Like, let's expose that, and then find new ways to, like,
Right.
maybe there's a passion that this person has been hiding because it wasn't part of their prescribed job, but
Yes.
maybe this passion is the thing that we need to guide us through the future. Like, just open up a little bit about who
Well,
this person is and what role they play. Yeah.
I love that. I mean, it's funny to hear you say it, because I think, in my mind, that question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? That was in every interview template I ever saw 20 years ago. But I will say that I don't see it very often now. And that's probably for a couple reasons. To your point, I don't know that I think companies have figured out now that people don't have the same longevity they used to. So,
No.
although it would be really nice to hold on to top employees, and that is ultimately our goal much of the time, sometimes it's realistic to know that you're just going to get a good couple of years out of an
Yeah.
employee, and maybe that's all you need, to take them to the next level and take you to the next level. So,
Yeah.
realistically, having those conversations, to your point, even if it's not with us, where do you see yourself? Those
Yeah.
conversations can be helpful during a difficult transition as well,
Yeah.
because yes, there may not be a future in this company, and that's
Yeah.
really scary and sad potentially. But that doesn't mean you don't have a future. That doesn't mean your career is
Exactly.
halted. You have all of this talent, you have all of these transferable skills, you are really wonderful at this and this.
Yeah.
That needs to be communicated too.
Yeah.
And it might sound strange to an employee if their manager is saying, oh my goodness, well, I know that company down the street is hiring for somebody like that, and you'd probably be a really good fit. But
Mhm.
maybe that's the conversation that needs to happen.
I think so. Yeah, because I think what we're talking about too, it might require a culture shift, not just in individual businesses, but like our broader culture in general. Because approaching it, where do you see yourself in 5 years, either here or elsewhere? That puts it reverses the priority. So the top priority is no longer serving the business. The business now serves your broader purpose and goals, which as an entrepreneur, I get to indulge in that all the time. But I would, maybe this is a chance and an opportunity to bring back that question in, performance reviews and interviews, but with that in mind. You are a person outside of this business. So who do you want to be in 5 years? And how can this job serve at getting you to that point?
I love
Flip the
that.
script
Yeah.
a little
I
bit.
mean, we do a lot of career planning, career laddering projects where employers are looking at that.
Yeah.
But when they're bringing employees into those scenarios, how are they communicating it?
Yeah.
Does the employee get that, or does the
Yeah.
employee still think that this is all within this organization?
Yeah.
Because although the employer might be doing it to retain them, that's
Yeah.
probably one of the motivators. The truth is that they value that employee, because that employee is bringing something important to the table and to the organization. And there's not an employer out there who realistically expects that anybody is going to dedicate their life to them anymore. I mean, you don't see it anymore. Certainly not with the younger generations coming into the workforce. The expectation is not a 20-year life sentence with any one company. You are going to have various jobs. You probably are going to have various careers, even in different areas. So how can we help you, and how can you help us? And it's kind of that mutual conversation and communicating that in a way that is meaningful to the employee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's two very different approaches that we've been kind of exploring. So one is kind of like this very, very top level leadership down, but this kind of relationship is very, direct report. Like I have a small team or whatever it is, but we're in this together, and just acknowledging again, you're a human playing a small part in this company's history. How does this chapter look like, and what does this next chapter look like? But I think brings me to my final point is, the vision for the future. So, I mean, the future is murky. I don't think anyone has a crystal ball, but there is going to be a future, right? Some businesses are going to not exist a year from now, well aware of this, and some will exist in some other form. So when we're kind of in this transition phase, at what point should people start looking or communicating a forward vision?
I mean, I think depending on what that vision is, communicating throughout the process, it would be my personal recommendation. As much as you can, but on a need to know basis as well. Do your best to communicate to employees and ensure that they understand that you are diligently figuring it out and communicating whatever decisions you can communicate at the time throughout the process. I don't like the idea of saving a lot of information all at once, because then they've been left in the dark for a while. I think, regular communications throughout, they don't all have to be in person or via Zoom. They might all, some of them might come through communication, emails or whatever, newsletters, if that still exists in certain organizations, through software platforms, etc. But just having that kind of regular communication is important.
I think for me, in the storyteller, sometimes the vision for the future is actually in your past. So I know for myself and the strategic choices that I've made from McEwen Media in the last couple of months, my future actually came to me in connecting with, well, what did I actually really want when I decided to go work for myself? What did I really want from this experience? And how can I get that today? I've been getting it from a bunch of different ways in the 4 years that I've been working on this business. So I think for a lot of businesses, your future is actually found in your past. There are core values and foundational beliefs built into every single business. We're seeing it with Hudson's Bay and its transition is going, like, really just the history of that business and its brand. That is also part of its future. So I think that's kind of, to me, that's kind of, you don't necessarily have to have all the answers.
Right.
We are going to, coming out of this recession, I'm calling it before anyone else does, coming through this, it's the business is going to look like XYZ. You may not have that strategy mapped out, but you still know at the core, this is this business, this is who we are, and this is why we exist.
And it reminds me, I have a client who I really admire, because I think they're just doing such an excellent job of pivoting in a difficult time. And to your point, this is a company that's existed for 40, 50 years now. They've been doing the same thing. They're in the manufacturing sector, and they've just been doing their thing, and they're successful. They've been doing fine, but they're being hit right now, and there's a lot of uncertainty in their industry, and they had a choice. They can either plan to kind of wind down, shut down, and accept whatever future is in store for them, or they can pivot. And they have been taking some incredibly brave and extraordinary steps to pivot their business and try something different that they may not have ever thought to do before. But because they know their skill set, they know their strengths, they know their values, they see a future maybe doing something similar but different. And I watch them in action, and I'm actually in awe of the way that they've communicated with employees, and the way that they're bringing my team on to support them through some of these transitions in the most positive way. And it's actually been very inspiring. So there is, there could be happy endings here too. It's not it doesn't have to all be doom and gloom, I guess.
Yeah. There will be happy endings. There will be sad endings. There will be endings. But I'm just noticing that the painting behind you, there are so many fluid lines and ups and downs. Like, that is just that is business. Like I know we're talking about, communicating in tough times and challenging environments. Life is tough and challenging. Like, look at what we've been experiencing since 2020. Like this is just the newest curveball
I
being thrown
know,
at
it's
us.
unbelievable.
We will continue to survive, but I think, yeah, connecting to your core, communicating clearly, recognizing there are humans in your organization. You are talking to people. You're not talking to employee numbers. It's not checks and balances. It's the human. There's a very human experience happening right now. And that is the core of the communication. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
exactly.
oh my goodness. Lisa, first of all, I want to applaud you for hopping on live. I know I forced you.
Not my comfort zone.
But I really enjoyed hearing your perspective too, because I come at these things as a storyteller and a communication. So to hear it from your point of view, that yeah, HR, this actually is part of your approach too. I feel very businessy today. So thank you so much for the hot take. So are there any businesses that want support and guidance in this space? How can they get in touch with you?
Oh, wow. Well, they can visit my website, peakperformancehr.ca or .com, actually. They can give me a call. There's a free consultation. They can sign up on the website, and I'll get in touch with them as soon as I receive any inquiries. We'll be in touch.
Amazing. Oh, heart-led HR expert. I love this so much. Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Tara.